All right, everyone, buckle up because today we're diving deep into a tech showdown that's hitting close to home for all of us.
Yeah, we're talking about the battle for your phone's freedom.
And no, I don't mean letting it finally win that staring contest with you when you should be sleeping.
We're tackling the debate around phone unlocking, specifically whether those wireless carriers should be allowed to keep your phone locked to their networks.
Exactly. And this whole thing is causing a huge uproar in the tech world right now.
It's sparking a lot of controversy.
For sure. And you've probably seen the headlines. T-Mobile, AT&T, they're not happy, not one bit, about this proposed rule from the FCC.
That's right, the FCC, those folks who basically act as the referees in the whole telecom world, they want to force carriers to unlock phones a lot faster than some of them are doing now.
It's kind of like this. You get cheaper phones up front, but then it's tougher to ditch your carrier and find something better.
You hit the nail on the head there.
Because right now, if you want to switch carriers, you're often stuck either paying a hefty fee to unlock your phone.
Or you're stuck waiting until your contract's up, which can feel like forever.
It's a classic case of, big companies trying to protect their bottom line.
Versus us, regular folks, who just want more control over our tech and our choices.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today.
We're dissecting all the arguments so you know exactly what's at stake.
So let's start with the FCC's proposal. What exactly are they suggesting, and why should we even care about it?
Well, it all boils down to giving you, the consumer, more control.
Okay, I'm listening.
Their proposal is pretty straightforward. Carriers would have to unlock phones within 60 days of activation.
60 days? That seems like a pretty big difference from what some carriers do now, right?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, it's like the Wild West out there.
The Wild West of unlocking.
Exactly. There's no consistency. Some carriers, they already unlock after 60 days, no problem.
Right, Verizon comes to mind.
Exactly. But then you've got others, and I'm looking at you, T-Mobile, who have been known to keep those prepaid phones locked for a whole year.
A whole year. That's like being sentenced to a bad relationship. You're stuck with a carrier you might not even like, just because your phone is basically held hostage.
You're not wrong. This new rule would mean you've got the freedom to jump ship if you find a sweeter deal elsewhere.
Okay, that makes sense. But I bet the carriers aren't too thrilled about this, especially when it comes to those tempting phone deals they offer.
Oh, you mean those deals where you get a brand new iPhone for a fraction of the price?
Exactly. It seems too good to be true, because it kind of is.
Well, the carriers are saying that if they're forced to unlock phones sooner, those deals might disappear faster than, you can say, 5G.
And T-Mobile seems to be the most vocal about this, haven't they?
They're leading the charge against this proposed rule, that's for sure.
So what's their main argument? Why are they so against it?
Their big thing is that a 60-day unlock would force them to raise prices.
Which makes sense, because they'd be losing money on those subsidized phones.
Precisely. They're basically saying they'd have to make up that lost revenue somehow, and it would likely fall on us, the consumers.
So they're trying to make us feel like we're the ones who would lose out. Like, oh, we want to give you these cheap phones, but the mean FCC is making us raise prices.
It's a clever tactic, playing on that fear of missing out on a good deal.
It's like they're saying, don't you dare take away our ability to dangle those shiny, affordable phones in front of people.
You've got to admire the strategy, even if you don't agree with it.
So are they being totally straight with us? Is there any truth to their claims about these potential price hikes?
Well, it's not so simple. It's not like they're lying, but it's also not the whole story.
Go on, I'm intrigued.
On one hand, they do use those phone locking periods to make back the money they lose from those discounted phones.
It's like they're spreading the cost of the phone over the length of your contract.
You got it. But then, on the other hand, it makes you wonder, are they using this as a way to hold on to customers?
Preventing them from switching to a competitor, even if the competitor has a better plan.
Exactly. It's a question worth thinking about.
It's like they're saying, we're giving you this great deal, but there's this invisible asterisk.
Right, and that asterisk is basically, as long as you stay with us.
And it's not just T-Mobile singing this tune, right? AT&T's on board with this too.
Oh yeah, they're singing the same song practically word for word.
So more expensive phones for everyone. That's their main concern.
It's definitely a big part of their argument, and they're really hammering home this point that unlocking could hurt lower-income folks the most.
Which makes sense, because those are the people who often rely on those subsidized phone deals the most.
Exactly, and they're worried that without those deals, some people might not be able to afford a new phone at all.
Okay, that's a valid point, but they've also thrown another argument into the mix, haven't they?
You're talking about the whole phone trafficking and fraud angle?
Yeah, that's the one. So is that for real?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to tell how much of that is genuine concern and how much is just a tactic to distract from the bigger issue. Consumer choice. They're essentially saying, oh no, if you make us unlock phones, it'll be chaos. Stolen phones everywhere.
It's like they're trying to scare us into siding with them.
It's not exactly a subtle approach.
It's kind of ironic when you think about it. We're trying to protect you while also keeping your phone locked to our network.
You said it. It's a mixed message if I've ever heard one.
It reminds me of those signs that say, "For your safety, please do not stand on the grass." Like, are you really concerned about my safety, or is this just about keeping the grass pristine?
Haha, exactly. But you know what makes this whole thing even more interesting?
What's that?
Verizon. They're not exactly singing from the same hymn sheet as T-Mobile and AT&T on this one.
That's right. Verizon's like that quiet student in the back of the class who suddenly drops a truth bomb that changes everything.
You got it. They're the wild card in all of this.
So what's Verizon's take on all of this?
Spill the tea.
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Verizon already unlocks phones after 60 days because of some existing rules tied to their particular spectrum licenses. So they're already doing what the FCC wants everyone to do.
Exactly. And get this. They seem totally fine with it.
Really? No complaints.
Nope. They've even hinted that a universal 60-day rule wouldn't exactly be the end of the world for their business.
Well, that's interesting. It kind of throws a wrench into the whole unlocking will be the death of us argument from T-Mobile and AT&T, doesn't it?
It sure does. It makes you wonder what they know that T-Mobile and AT&T don't.
Or maybe Verizon's just playing a different game altogether.
Could be. And it's not just Verizon shaking things up.
Oh. Who else is joining the party?
We've got consumer advocacy groups jumping into the ring too, and they are all about this unlocking thing.
So they're basically saying that unlocking phones is a good thing for everyone except, well, the carriers themselves.
Pretty much. Their argument boils down to this. More power to the people. They believe unlocking phones will make the market more competitive.
Which could lead to lower prices and better service.
That's the idea. And they also bring up another great point.
What's that?
The used phone market. They say that unlocking phones would give a boost to the used phone market, which is great news for anyone who can't afford a brand new phone.
Right, they would make technology more accessible to everyone.
Precisely. It's about giving those devices a second life and making sure that everyone has access to technology regardless of their budget.
So we've got the carriers on one side, consumer groups on the other, and Verizon just chilling in the corner watching the drama unfold.
It's shaping up to be quite the showdown.
It sure is, and at the heart of it all is this fundamental question. Are cheaper phones up front worth sacrificing the freedom to switch carriers whenever we want?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's a question that the FCC wants you, dear listener, to answer.
That's right. They're asking for your feedback on this whole thing. They want to know what matters most to you.
So if you've got an opinion about phone unlocking, now is the time to make it heard.
It's not every day you have the chance to directly weigh in on something that could change how we use technology.
Your voice matters, so don't be afraid to use it.
It's a tough choice, right? Like, do you go for the cheaper phone now knowing you might be stuck with your current carrier for a while?
It's a classic dilemma. And what I find really interesting is that the FCC is acknowledging how tricky this whole thing is by actually asking for our input, from us regular folks.
That's a good point. They're not just holed up in some government building making decisions without considering how it affects real people.
Exactly. They're recognizing that this isn't some abstract policy debate. This is about people's lives, their budgets, their choices.
It's one thing to talk about phone unlocking in theory, but it's another thing entirely to think about how this could impact, say, a single parent trying to make ends meet.
Right, or a student who depends on their phone to stay connected but might not have a ton of cash to throw around.
It's about finding that balance.
Right.
Making sure that we're promoting competition and innovation in the market, but not at the expense of making technology less accessible.
You hit the nail on the head. And we can't forget about the digital divide that already exists in this country. We're seeing these gaps in access to affordable internet, and this whole phone unlocking thing could make those gaps even wider.
It's like we don't want to create a situation where only people with a certain income level have the freedom to switch carriers and get those better deals.
Exactly. That wouldn't be right. And that's why the FCC has to think long term here, Will a 60-day unlocking rule actually lead to more competition and lower prices for everyone?
Or will it have the opposite effect?
Exactly. Could it end up making things harder for certain groups of people These are the questions they need to be
It
asking.
just goes to show you how a decision that seems, on the surface, like it's just about tech specs and regulations, can actually have these huge ripple effects.
Absolutely. It touches on social issues, economic issues, even ethical questions about access and fairness in a digital world.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. But even if the FCC decides, okay, we're going for it, 60-day unlocking for everyone, there's still a big question mark hanging over the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, we can't forget about the legal side of this.
Right, because T-Mobile's already hinted that they might challenge the FCC's authority to even implement this kind of rule.
They're basically saying, hold on, FCC, you might not have the power to make us do this.
It's like a legal showdown brewing in the background.
It is, and T-Mobile's not backing down. They're prepared to argue that the FCC is overstepping its boundaries.
And they're bringing a Supreme Court ruling to the table, which is a pretty bold move.
It shows you how high the stakes are here, right? This isn't just some minor disagreement. This is about who gets to control what happens in the world of tech.
So this whole thing about phone unlocking, it's not just a tech issue anymore, it's a legal battle that could have huge consequences.
Absolutely. It could set a precedent for how tech is regulated moving forward.
And it raises some fundamental questions. Who gets to make the rules in this digital age? Is it the government, the corporations, or should it be us, the users?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a question that's going to keep popping up as technology becomes more and more intertwined with our lives.
This is getting juicy. It's like we've stumbled into an episode of Law and Order, but instead of detectives and lawyers, we've got tech giants and the FCC duking it out in court.
It's definitely got that legal thriller vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, who knows? This whole thing could end up going all the way to the Supreme Court.
Could you imagine? Our phones, those little pocket computers we can't seem to live without, sparking a landmark Supreme Court case.
Stranger things have happened, right? And think about what's at stake here. It's not just about whether or not you can switch carriers without jumping through hoops. It's about setting a precedent for how tech is regulated in this country.
So what you're saying is, this seemingly simple question about unlocking your phone could actually have a ripple effect on the entire tech industry.
Absolutely. It really underscores how we're still figuring out the rules of the road in this rapidly evolving digital world.
Like we're building the car as we're driving it.
Exactly. And it's not always smooth sailing. We're constantly encountering these ethical and legal potholes along the way.
And sometimes those potholes turn into full-blown legal battles.
That's right. And this phone unlocking debate is a perfect example of that. It really highlights how these conversations about technology are never just about the technology itself.
It's about something bigger, right? Like control, power. Who gets to call the shots?
Exactly. It's about our fundamental rights in a digital age. What does freedom look like in a world that's increasingly mediated by technology?
That's a deep thought for a Tuesday afternoon.
But it's something we need to be thinking about because these aren't just abstract questions. They have real-world implications for how we live our lives.
So what can we do? I mean, besides contacting the FCC and making our voices heard, which we've already covered, but are there other ways we can be more proactive about shaping the future of tech?
Absolutely. For starters, we can become more informed consumers. Like, before you buy that new phone or subscribe to that streaming service, do a little digging.
Look beyond the shiny marketing materials.
Exactly. Find out what a company's stance is on things like data privacy, net neutrality, those issues that matter to you.
It's about voting with your wallet, right?
Yeah.
Supporting companies that align with your values.
Exactly. And don't just blindly click agree on those terms and conditions.
Oh, you mean those walls of text nobody ever reads?
Those are the ones. Take a few minutes to actually understand what you're agreeing to because those terms have a real impact on your digital life.
Good point. Knowledge is power, as they say.
And beyond that, we can get involved in advocacy efforts. There are so many great organizations out there fighting for a more open, accessible, and equitable digital world.
It's about finding something you care about and lending your voice, your time, your resources to the cause.
Exactly, because this isn't just about corporations and government agencies calling all the shots. We have a role to play in shaping this digital future.
It's about reclaiming some of that power, that control, and making sure that technology serves us, not the other way around.
Well said. And as our lives become increasingly intertwined with technology, it's more important than ever to stay engaged, informed, and most importantly, vocal.
Speak up. Make your voice heard. Because even a small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. This whole conversation about phone unlocking, it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle we're all figuring out together.
And it's a puzzle worth solving. Because the future of technology is really the future of how we live, work, connect, and create.
It's about shaping a digital world that reflects our values, our hopes, our aspirations.
It's about building a future where technology empowers us all, not just a select few.
And that's a future worth fighting for.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of phone unlocking, legal battles, and the quest for a more equitable digital future.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but hopefully you're walking away feeling empowered, informed, and ready to make your voice heard.
Because at the end of the day, the future of tech is in our hands. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.